Big day, everyone. Biggest day of the year. Who's fired up? Beth is fired up.
On Monday, as it does every year, Apple rolled out a series of slickly produced videos for its worldwide developers conference. Apple likes to go big with its intros, and this one showed a bunch of Apple execs skydiving over the company's circular California headquarters. But the real drama, the thing the audience was waiting for, was Tim Cook's announcement that Apple was embracing AI.
Introducing Apple Intelligence, the new personal intelligence system that makes your most personal products even more useful and delightful.
I think it was a pretty big deal and a pretty big moment for big tech and for the AI boom and the AI industry in general.
That's Gerrit De Vynck, who covers tech for The Washington Post.
Apple has always sort of prided itself on doing its own thing. They don't like to be lumped in with the likes of Google or Facebook or Amazon. They see themselves, making devices and being much more about privacy and exclusivity and doing things in a very Apple way.
While AI mania has spread across Silicon Valley over the past few years, Apple has been more hesitant. Other companies rolled out chatbots or image generators to the public, even if they sometimes spit back nonsense.
Now they've really done a 180, and the same way Google is doing it and the same way Microsoft is doing it, they are stuffing AI into every single product they can think of.
Starting in the fall, Apple says it will incorporate so-called Apple Intelligence into its new phones, iPads, and Macs. And sure, there are plenty of ways to use generative AI right now. You can try OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Gemini. But the idea of AI baked into an iPhone, part of everyday life, that feels different.
Now, because iPhones and MacBooks are used by tens of millions of people all over the world, especially here in the US and in Europe, iPhones are, make up about half of the phones that people use. And so it will get in front of people in a whole new way. And a lot of people who have not used ChatGPT and may not even have heard of it before are going to be hearing about it for the first time and interacting with it for the first time and deciding whether they like it or not.
Today on the show, Apple is in the AI game now. Is this an inflection point for the technology or just classic Apple marketing? I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. When it comes to your finances, go for the credit card that's always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We're talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great tax rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. It's fair to say that over the last few years, Silicon Valley has become obsessed with AI, particularly generative AI. the kinds of applications that power chatbots and image generators. But the building blocks of this technology have actually been around for decades.
AI is sort of a funny thing. Some people will say, well, if you went back 20 years and you showed them Google Maps, where you can put in any address and it will just automatically direct your car there super easily. You never have to think about directions again. As, oh my goodness, that is incredible artificial intelligence. That is a machine doing something that would take me a lot of brain power and research to be able to do on my own. Something that I used to have to do, memorize streets, look at a map. Suddenly, this little computer in my pocket is doing it, and none of us ever have to think about that again. And so as we get used to technology, we start to sort of just see it as boring and routine and maybe not as magical or innovative as it might have been before. So the big tech companies, although AI technology was moving forward scientifically, they were able to do new things all the time. They were more layering it into their technology in the back end. So a few years ago, Google search became a lot smarter at sort of auto completing your search. The big tech companies have been layering this into their existing products. And then at the end of 2022, OpenAI put out ChatGPT. They put this technology into a chatbot, and suddenly a lot of people used it. It went viral. And both people inside the industry who know AI very well and people who don't know much about AI at all were sort of blown away and had this moment of like, oh my goodness, this is something new. This feels special. This feels different. And I think the tech industry had not had a lot of those moments in recent years. There's been a lot of bad news for tech. There was Cambridge Analytica with Facebook, and then there was, Russian influence in the election. There's been disinformation and misinformation when it comes to vaccines and COVID during the pandemic. And tech has been wrapped up into culture wars as well. And so a lot of people in tech feel that the world is kind of against them. And suddenly here was something that felt truly innovative, truly new, truly special. And now we are, a year and a half into this boom, and we have all these products, we have all these events, but a lot of them don't really work that well. There's still not necessarily huge adoption. And so we're sort of in this awkward moment for the tech industry where everyone in tech has decided this is the next big thing. If it's not as big as the iPhone, it might be as big as the internet. It might even be as big as electricity itself.
Wow.
And yet most people are still maybe a little skeptical when it comes to AI.
Well, that's why I think what Apple is doing and what Apple was messaging on Monday is so interesting. It very much seemed to be a message of like, you're busy. Here's some tech that can help. It's not going to make things up out of whole cloth or tell you to eat rocks like Gemini has told some people. It's going to help you kind of automate your life in a nice, easy way. It felt warmer and fuzzier.
Yeah, and I think it really remains to be seen whether that's actually going to be the case. And, interesting enough, I mean, the things that Apple showed off are not available yet. We don't actually know exactly when they're going to be available. Sometime this year, that could be next month, that could be in November. I'm sure behind the scenes, they are still working out, how to put this out there in a way that feels as if it aligns with what they're used to putting out there, very smooth, very flawless products that just work and that look good while doing it. So I do think it's a huge test for the tech industry. If it can Apple pull this off and take generative AI, which has been really messy. I mean, almost every major launch from Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, they've thrown something out there. They said, look, this is the future. This is amazing. And then a few weeks later or a few days later or even a few hours later, people are showing examples on social media of the thing completely going haywire of, Google search AI answers, telling people to put glue on their pizza. And then Google says, oh, well, we're working it out. They pull it back and then they start working on it. And it's kind of this process that takes time. And that's not how Apple likes to work. And so I do think that we will inevitably see those same moments from Apple. And maybe it's a bit of a culture shift for them where they also want to try to keep up with their big tech competitors. And maybe they're going to have to get used to sort of having these gaffes out there. They don't want to do that.
That's not the Apple way.
It's exactly, but it's hard for me to believe, again, this technology, it doesn't always work for the way that people want it to work. I mean, large language models are creative. They come up with things and they don't know what's real and what's not. All they know is what they've been trained on.
Apple is doing a lot of this through partnerships with OpenAI, possibly with other players. Why the partnerships? That has not been their model to date.
I do think that Apple is not yet in a position where their own internal AI is as capable as an OpenAI AI or a Google AI. And so they needed a little bit of help so that they could at least meet that kind of bar. I also think that will be doing deals with other AI companies. I don't think it's completely outside the realm of possibility that within a few months, you may also be able to use a Google AI or an AI developed by even an open source, organization that you can just sort of get online inside your iPhone. You can kind of pick and choose. That's also a way for them to show that they are being more open. They're keeping the choice in the consumer's hand. And also, if the AI does something really weird, they can blame it on OpenAI or blame it on Google and not necessarily take on that responsibility and liability for themselves. So it's sort of a combination of reasons why they decided to do this partnership.
Is there a risk here when you talk about like, whoops, maybe that was OpenAI's technology that did that? I can see that from a sort of shielding yourself as a corporation way. On the other hand, getting into bed with OpenAI at all seems in some ways un-Apple. Apple tends to be relatively risk averse, and OpenAI has had a pretty dramatically rocky year.
Tim Cook has been asked this exact question, and he says that OpenAI is the best out there in terms of what they need, and they looked at all the other options and they still went for them. Of course, Tim Cook didn't go into whether Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, should be continue to be the CEO, or questions about the company's board, or questions about the company using copyrighted data, or even Scarlett Johansson's voice to train one of its AI models, which OpenAI has said that they did not do. There's still all these questions, and I think OpenAI will continue to be in the news. And I think it just again shows how this moment is a really fast moving and interesting time for big tech, which has been pretty slow and sclerotic for a long time, at least in terms of major changes in terms of power. I do think it does shift things around, and it's leading to these kind of outcomes that we wouldn't have thought would be possible just a couple of years ago, like Apple making a deal with OpenAI.
When we come back, Apple, Google, Microsoft all want you to use AI. But do you? Get 3% daily cash back when you use Apple Card to buy a new iPhone 15 or pair of AirPods at Apple. You can choose to grow it at 4.4% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account through Apple Card. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility. Savings and Apple Card by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Member FDIC. Terms and more at applecard.com.
How is AI shaping human stuff? Work, relationships, culture, art? Will all of this look drastically different in the next 10 years? Some predictions are just hype, but not all of them. My name is Bilawal Sidhu, and I'm here to cut through the noise and clear AI up for you in my new podcast from the TED Audio Collective, The TED AI Show. Join me in interviewing the world's leading experts, artists, and journalists for a firsthand look and new perspective on the fast-moving world of AI. Listen anywhere you get your podcasts.
Is there any indication that consumers want this on this kind of scale?
A lot of people are pretty skeptical of tech companies and kind of the position and power that they have in our lives. I think people also saw what happened with cryptocurrency, where a lot of people were saying, look, this is the next big thing. This internet money is going to take over the world, and you're never going to have to use the US dollar ever again. And some people bought into that and ended up losing a lot of money. So I do think that there's a general skepticism of AI as sort of a marketing tool to get people back into and spending more money with tech companies. And I think that's really healthy skepticism. At the same time, AI is not cryptocurrency. I mean, there is real technology here. There is real science that is, new and interesting, and we can do things with this technology that we were not able to do a couple of years ago. So I do think we'll see this process where a lot of the ways we interact with computers starts to slowly change. Every app is going to have to be redesigned to allow you to sort of have a conversation with it, or to ask an AI instead of going and booking your own flight through Google Flights or Expedia. We'll likely be able to ask an AI like, hey, can you go book a flight for me and send me a text with 2 options, and all these things that we've sort of wanted from our technology for years, but no one's ever really been able to pull off. I think a lot of people feel that this latest breakthrough in AI technology will allow us to finally build those tools that make it more seamless and easy to interact with computers. But I don't think that people are necessarily clamoring to pay $20 a month for ChatGPT right now. Some people, for sure, computer coders say that it's very helpful in helping them do things that were, time consuming and sort of rote tasks that they had to do beforehand. But I do think for a lot of people, there will probably be this curve of, oh, like this is a big deal. Should I use it? Maybe I use it a little bit and then I kind of set it aside again. And so I think it's up to the technology companies to develop tools that we actually want to use. And they're trying really hard right now, but there's a lot of competitive pressure that is kind of leading to them putting things out before it's super clear that people do want it.
I am thinking about the way that those large tech companies build their products, specifically generative AI products. They require a lot of computing power and they require a lot of data. And that is one of the places where the companies creating generative AI models have gotten some pushback, right? Like everything you are doing and putting into that model is training that model. That's very different from how Apple has tended to operate in the past. They like to market their embrace of privacy. How do they kind of square that disconnect?
Yeah, it's a very good question for the Apple AI, what they trained it on. And I think that most people would probably guess that they trained it on similar public data sets as all the other AI companies were trained on. All the other AI models were trained on, things scraped from the internet. And so I think that that's a very important question. We need to keep asking these companies, where did you get this data? What went into it? How did you decide what to put into it? Did you pay the people whose data you used? Are you planning to do that in the future? This is sort of one of the core questions of generative AI that really is yet to be resolved. And I think a lot of people at the tech companies hope will just go away and that people will give up demanding answers on that. In terms of privacy, Apple is really saying, look, we're running this on your device. And for things that take up more computing power than your device is able to handle, we're going to run it in a special Apple data center with Apple computer chips. We're not going to send it to another cloud provider like Google or Amazon. We're going to keep it in-house. We're going to do it our way and do it an Apple way. And I think, that is a fair thing for them to say. I think it's also important to remember that although Apple does talk a lot about privacy and they do have a different business model that doesn't necessarily involve advertising to the extent that it does for Google or Facebook, Apple still has a huge advertising business in the App Store. If you open the App Store now, you see that there's, whenever you search for an app, they'll show you an ad for a different app at the top. They're using your data to decide which ad to show you. And Apple is, maybe they're better at privacy than some of the other companies that we deal with, but that doesn't mean that they're perfect on privacy. That doesn't mean that everything you put on your iPhone or upload to the iCloud is perfectly safe and that it can't be hacked or anything like that. Apple is a technology company like any other, and they do have large behavior-driven advertising businesses as well. And so I think we also need to not let Apple off the hook when they make all these claims about privacy and make sure that we interrogate those. And, that's what tech reporters are trying to do with Apple. But I think it's also important for consumers to kind of think about that as well, that just because Apple brands this as private doesn't necessarily mean that what's private to them means the same thing as what might be private to the consumer.
The government has started examining AI a little more closely, both the Federal Trade Commission, the Justice Department. Are they going to bless these partnerships?
They don't really have a say on these specific partnerships because they are not full-on acquisitions or mergers, which is something that the government can sort of step into and say, hey, we want to maybe block this or at least make an argument to the courts for why it shouldn't go through. And so it's quite interesting that you've seen these big AI partnerships rather than acquisitions. The most famous one, obviously, is Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI, which has really boosted Microsoft into the forefront of big tech and seen as this brilliant deal that allowed Microsoft to leapfrog Google and, really own the future 20 years ago, Microsoft might have just acquired OpenAI, taken out a bunch of money and bought them and brought their tech on board that way. And, they didn't do that with OpenAI. And maybe that's because OpenAI would have cost a lot of money to acquire. But I also think that because we have a lot more antitrust scrutiny of big tech deals, government's asking a lot more questions than they did just even a few years ago about whether big tech companies should be allowed to acquire companies in other businesses. I think that's part of the reason why these companies are going the route of partnerships instead of acquisitions. And so the government has said they are going to be looking into this. I mean, they do have a suspicion that this is a way to get around some of the existing antitrust rules and laws. I do think that this OpenAI deal, although we don't know the financials, we don't even know if OpenAI is paying for the pleasure of having ChatGPT on iPhones or whether Apple is paying OpenAI for access to ChatGPT as a product. So I think there's so much opaqueness that really needs to be cut through, and we need to understand more about these deals and, who's winning, who's losing, how they change competition, what they mean for the market going forward. And the government at this point is definitely asking those questions.
It feels like as a consumer, if you're not someone who has followed every twist and turn, is there a way to escape AI, or it's just inevitable?
Apple says that a lot of these tools are not, they're going to be opt-in. You don't need to use these things. And, I think Siri is a good example. We all have it on our phones if we're using an iPhone, but that doesn't mean that people are necessarily using it all the time. Maybe they use it to set an alarm or, to do little changes on their phone, but they're not necessarily using it in all the ways that Apple wants us to use it or has pitched us to use it. And so I think, there's all sorts of things that, because of the power of big tech companies and because of these ecosystems that they set up to compete against each other and that they try to pull us into and lock us into, there's a lot of things we don't have a say about when it comes to our technology. You want to use an Apple computer, it doesn't necessarily work very well with PCs or with technology that's developed for PCs. There's all these sort of trade-offs we make as consumers. We can't just do whatever we want when it comes to our tech. And that's because the big tech companies decide what that looks like. And they want to, square off their walled gardens. And so I do think that AI is probably going to be something similar where you're going to see it a lot. It's probably going to pop up a lot. You're going to have a lot of little chatbots saying, hey, can I help you with that? Hey, do you want to, ask me that? Do you want me to write that for you instead of you writing that email? Do you want me to edit your email? Like, can I help? Hello, hello, hello. And I think most people are just going to, XXX and click out of it. But I don't think that there's a way to completely avoid it. We sort of live in the big tech companies world, and we kind of have to live with that.
Gerrit De Vynck, thank you so much for talking with me.
Anytime.
Gerrit De Vynck is a tech reporter at The Washington Post. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell, Patrick Fort, and Cheyna Roth. Our show is edited by Paige Osborne. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate, and TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you like what you listened to today, the single best way to support our show is to join Slate Plus. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. We'll be back on Sunday with the incredible true story of how the FBI made its own encrypted phone app and caught a bunch of criminals. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening. When it comes to your finances, go for the credit card that's always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We're talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Nerds! Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast. Get your head in the financial game with smart investing and budgeting tips straight from the nerds. NerdWallet's experts will set future you up for success with dependable, fact-based insights. No financial misinformation allowed. Learn how to save on your summer vacation, find your next credit card, or loan for a big purchase, and invest in your next index fund. Make smarter decisions in 2024. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.